blood on his hands had barely dried when the preacher asked him to pray for the dead men lying in the dust outside the saloon, and he laughed because God had stopped listening to men like him.
Welcome to Wild West Love. Please subscribe to our channel.
1878, and the land stretched out in every direction like a canvas painted only in shades of brown and gold, interrupted by the occasional scrub brush clinging to life with the same desperation as the people who called this territory home. Clara Holloway stood on the porch of the general store, her calico dress faded from countless washings in the creek that ran behind her small homestead 3 miles east of town. Her hands, rough from work that would have broken most women, gripped the wooden railing until her knuckles turned white as bone. Her eyes, the color of summer sage, were fixed on the 3 riders approaching from the western road, their silhouettes black against the burning sky. She knew those riders. She had been dreading their return for 2 months now, ever since the letter arrived bearing the seal of the territorial judge in Austin. The letter that claimed her daughter, 7-year-old Lily, belonged to another family entirely. The letter that sought to tear apart everything Clara had built from nothing after her husband Thomas died of fever 3 winters past. Beside her, hiding behind the folds of her mother's worn skirt, Lily peered out with eyes too wise for her years. The child had her father's dark hair and her mother's strong jaw, but there was something else in her face, something that spoke of secrets and sorrows that no child should know. She clutched a rag doll against her chest, the only toy she owned, its button eyes staring blankly at the approaching doom. The riders pulled up in front of the general store, their horses breathing hard from the journey. The man in front was Silas Blackwood, a lawyer from Austin whose reputation preceded him like the stench of death precedes a vulture. He wore a black suit despite the heat, and his thin lips curled into something that might have been a smile on a different face. Beside him rode 2 men Clara recognized as hired guns, their pistols hanging low on their hips, their eyes empty of anything resembling human compassion. Silas dismounted with the careful precision of a man unaccustomed to horseback riding and approached the porch, removing his hat in a mockery of gentlemanly behavior. His voice carried the oily smoothness of a snake oil salesman when he spoke. "Mrs. Holloway, I trust you received correspondence from Judge Harrison regarding the matter of the child known as Lily. I have come to execute the court's order and return the girl to her rightful family, the Worthingtons of San Antonio." Clara felt her heart turn to ice despite the blazing heat. The Worthingtons were wealthy cattle barons with more money than morality, and their claim to Lily was based on a tissue of lies. They said the child was the illegitimate daughter of their deceased son William, that Clara had stolen her from a San Antonio orphanage years ago. It was all fabrication, every word of it, but the Worthingtons had enough gold to make judges believe whatever they wished. "That child is mine," Clara said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. "I carried her in my body for 9 months. I brought her into this world in a cabin with only a midwife to help me. I have her birth papers signed and witnessed." Silas waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away a bothersome fly. "Forgeries, according to our experts. The court has made its determination, Mrs. Holloway. The child will come with us today, peacefully if possible, forcefully if necessary." The 2 hired guns shifted in their saddles, hands moving closer to their weapons. Around the street, townsfolk who had been going about their business stopped to watch. Some retreated into doorways, wanting no part of whatever violence might erupt. Others stood frozen, caught between the desire to help and the fear of powerful enemies. Clara pulled Lily closer, her arm wrapped protectively around the child's thin shoulders. "You will not take my daughter. Not today. Not ever. I will die before I let you steal her from me." "That can be arranged," one of the hired guns muttered, earning a sharp look from Silas that silenced him. "There is no need for unpleasantness," the lawyer said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Come now, Mrs. Holloway. You are a woman alone in a harsh world. You cannot provide for the child the way the Worthingtons can. Think of her future. Think of the education, the opportunities, the life of comfort that awaits her in San Antonio. I think of her every moment of every day, Clara replied, her voice rising. I think of her laughter and her tears, and the way she calls out for me when she has nightmares. I think of the love we share, a love that no amount of Worthington money could ever buy. She is my daughter, my flesh and blood, and no corrupt judge or fancy lawyer will ever change that truth. Silas sighed heavily, as if dealing with a particularly stubborn child. He nodded to the two hired guns, who began to dismount. I had hoped to avoid this, truly I did. But you leave me no choice. The court order will be executed. Resist, and you will be arrested for contempt. Continue to resist, and well, my associates here are authorized to use whatever force necessary. Clara felt Lily's small hands gripping her dress even tighter, heard the soft whimper of fear escape the child's lips. In that moment she knew she would fight. She would scratch and claw and bite until they killed her, and even then her ghost would haunt them across the desert until justice was served. The hired guns approached the porch steps, their spurs jingling with each step, their faces set in expressions of cold indifference. Clara looked around desperately for help, but the townsfolk had melted away like morning dew, leaving her alone to face her tormentors. And then she heard it, the sound of hooves, slow and deliberate, coming from the eastern road. Everyone turned to look at the newcomer, this unexpected witness to the unfolding tragedy. He rode a paint horse that had seen better days, its coat dull with trail dust. The man himself was tall in the saddle, his shoulders broad beneath a sun-faded blue shirt. A battered hat sat low on his forehead, casting shadows across a face that told stories of hardship and survival. His jaw was covered in several days' worth of stubble, and his eyes, when they caught the light, were the gray of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. He wore a single pistol on his right hip, the holster well worn but the weapon itself gleaming with careful maintenance. There was nothing remarkable about him at first glance, nothing that would distinguish him from any other drifter passing through on his way to somewhere else. And yet something in the way he carried himself made the hired guns pause in their advance. The stranger reined his horse to a stop a few yards from the assembled group and sat for a moment, taking in the scene with those stormy eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried clearly in the still air. Looks like somebody's having themselves a disagreement. Silas turned to face the newcomer, irritation plain on his pinched features.
This is official court business, stranger. It does not concern you.
I suggest you ride on and forget what you've seen here. The stranger seemed to consider this advice. He looked at Clara, still standing defiant on the porch with her daughter pressed against her. He looked at the hired guns, their hands hovering near their weapons. He looked at the empty windows of the buildings lining the street, behind which the good citizens of Redemption cowered in safety. Then he swung down from his horse, with an easy grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. He walked forward until he stood between the hired guns and the porch steps, his back to Clara, facing the men who had come to take her child. The way I see it, he said, a woman's got a right to her own flesh and blood. Seems to me any piece of paper that says otherwise ain't worth the ink used to print it. Silas's face reddened with anger. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I represent? The Worthington family has connections that reach to the highest levels of government. They will destroy you, stranger. They will crush you like an insect beneath their boot. The stranger smiled, a thin expression that held no warmth. I've been threatened by better men than you, lawyer. Didn't take then. Won't take now. One of the hired guns stepped forward, his hand closing around the grip of his pistol. Mister, you best step aside before you get yourself hurt. We got no quarrel with you, but we will put you down if you interfere with official business. The stranger's eyes flickered to the gunman, assessing him with the practiced gaze of a man who had faced death more times than he cared to remember. What's your name, son? The question seemed to catch the gunman off guard. Cole, he said after a moment. Jake Cole. Well, Jake Cole, I'm going to give you some advice that might save your life today. Walk away. Get on your horse and ride out of this town and don't ever come back. Whatever the Worthingtons are paying you ain't worth dying for. Jake Cole laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the weathered buildings. You think you can take both of us? Old man like you against two professionals? You must be touched in the head. Maybe I am, the stranger admitted. But I've been touched in the head for a long time now, and it ain't killed me yet. Clara watched this exchange with growing hope, hardly daring to believe that salvation had arrived in the form of this dusty wanderer. She didn't know his name, didn't know why he had chosen to stand against these men, but she felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. Silas, sensing that his carefully laid plans were unraveling, tried a different approach. He stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Stranger, surely we can come to some arrangement. The Worthingtons are generous people. They would gladly compensate you for any inconvenience. Name your price. Everyone has a price. The stranger turned to look at the lawyer, and something in his expression made Silas take an involuntary step backward. You want to know my price? Here it is. You get back on your horses and you ride out of here. You go back to Austin and you tell your judge that his order won't be executed. Not today, not ever. And you tell the Worthingtons that if they send anyone else to take this woman's child, those men won't be coming home. You're making a terrible mistake, Silas hissed. The Worthingtons will not rest until they have what they want. They have resources you cannot imagine, power that extends across this entire territory. Then they best get started, the stranger replied, because I ain't going anywhere. The standoff held for a long moment, tension crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. The second hired gun, who had remained silent until now, slowly moved his hand away from his weapon. He was older than Jake Cole, old enough to recognize death when he saw it standing in front of him. Silas, he said quietly, maybe we should reconsider our approach here. Shut up, the lawyer snapped. We have the law on our side. We have authority. Authority don't mean much when you're bleeding out in the dirt, the older gunman replied. I've seen men like this before. They got nothing to lose and everything to prove. You want to test him, you go right ahead. But I ain't dying for some rich family's vendetta. He turned and walked back to his horse, mounting up without another word. After a moment of hesitation, Jake Cole followed, his face dark with suppressed anger, but his survival instinct stronger than his pride. Silas stood alone now, his carefully constructed scheme crumbling around him. He looked at the stranger, then at Clara still clutching her daughter on the porch, then back at his departing escorts. The reality of his situation finally seemed to penetrate his arrogance. This isn't over, he said, pointing a trembling finger at the stranger. Mark my words, this is far from over. The Worthingtons will have that child one way or another. Maybe they will, the stranger acknowledged, but not today, and not through you. Silas gathered what remained of his dignity and stalked back to his horse. He mounted clumsily, nearly losing his balance in his haste to depart. The three riders headed west, back toward Austin, leaving behind only the settling dust and the memory of their threats. Clara felt her legs give way beneath her, and she sank down onto the porch steps, pulling Lily into her lap. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks as she held her daughter close, rocking back and forth in silent thanksgiving. The child clung to her mother, not fully understanding what had transpired, but sensing that the danger had passed, at least for now. The stranger stood watching the road until the three riders disappeared over the horizon. Only then did he turn back to face the woman and child he had defended. He removed his hat, revealing hair that was more gray than brown, and knelt down to their level. Ma'am, he said gently, you and your daughter should probably get somewhere safe, somewhere they won't think to look. Men like the Worthingtons don't give up easy, and that lawyer was right about one thing, this ain't over. Clara looked up at him through her tears, searching his face for some explanation of his actions. Why? She asked. her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you help us? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." The stranger was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain. "I had a daughter once, long time ago, before the war. She was about this one's age when the fever took her. Took my wife too. I couldn't save them, couldn't do a damn thing but watch them slip away." He reached out and gently touched Lily's dark hair, a gesture so tender it seemed impossible from a man who had just faced down armed killers. "When I rode into town and saw what was happening, I saw my little girl's face, saw my wife begging God to spare our child. I know it don't make sense, but in that moment, helping you felt like the only thing that mattered." Clara took his calloused hand in hers and squeezed it tight. "What's your name, stranger?" "Josiah," he replied. "Josiah Morgan." "Mr. Morgan, I don't have much. Our homestead is small and life is hard, but whatever I have is yours for as long as you want it. You gave me back my daughter today. That's a debt I can never repay." Josiah shook his head slowly. "Ain't no debt, ma'am. Just a man doing what's right in a world that's forgotten the meaning of the word." He stood and looked around at the town that was slowly coming back to life, its citizens emerging from their hiding places now that the danger had passed. Some had the grace to look ashamed. Others simply went about their business as if nothing had happened. "You said your homestead is 3 miles east?" he asked. Clara nodded, rising to her feet with Lily still in her arms. "A small cabin by the creek. It's not much, but it's home." "Then let's get you home," Josiah said. "I'll ride with you. Make sure you get there safe. After that, well, we'll figure out our next move. The Worthingtons won't stop coming, but we'll be ready for them." "We?" Clara asked, a note of hope creeping into her voice. Josiah looked at the woman and the child, saw the fear and the determination battling in their eyes, and felt something stir in his chest that he had thought long dead. Purpose, a reason to keep going in a world that had taken everything from him. "We," he confirmed. "If you'll have me, I mean to see this through. Whatever comes, you and Lily won't face it alone." Clara smiled through her tears, and for the first time in months, she felt the weight of despair lift from her shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, and danger still lurked on the horizon. But she was no longer alone, and in this harsh land where survival depended on strength and solidarity, that made all the difference. They walked together toward the eastern road, the stranger, the widow, and the child. 3 souls bound together by circumstance and courage. Behind them, the town of redemption watched them go, and perhaps, just perhaps, some of its citizens felt a stirring of shame at their own cowardice. The sun began its slow descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere out there, the Worthingtons were planning their next move, their wealth and power coiling like a rattlesnake preparing to strike. But in this moment, walking through the amber dust toward an uncertain future, Clara Holloway felt something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. And beside her, Josiah Morgan felt something too: the sense that after years of wandering, after losing everything that had ever mattered, he had finally found something worth fighting for, worth living for, worth dying for, if it came to that. The story of Clara, Lily, and Josiah was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning. But whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever enemies they would face them together. And in the wild, unforgiving West, where justice was often measured in bullets and blood, that unity was the most powerful weapon of all.